so my name is Erin Drew, and we are in the Angelo State Library in the study room, and it is March 6th at 3:33 p.m. Okay, so can you state your name for me?
It's Caleb Miller.
All right, and when and where were you born?
So I was born in Carrollton, Texas, which is up further north of here,
Okay.
in January 17th, 1989.
Okay. And did you grow up there?
I did not. So my parents moved around a lot actually when I was a kid. So I have no memory being there at all. I grew up in town, sort of like north of Dallas area for the early years, a child in a little town called Denison. My grandparents have always lived in San Angelo, and so we moved here at some point growing up, and this is pretty much where I call home.
Okay, so you call San Angelo home?
I do.
All right, so since you're technically like a West Texas native, how would you define West Texas?
West Texas is there's a lot of personality. I think we are we're very proud of a lot of things, of our work ethic, our hospitality, our appreciation for the military, and yeah, it's just a lot of personality.
Yes, I agree. And where does it begin, do you think? Like, where do you think this came from?
That's an interesting question. There's a lot of jokes that have been made over the years of people saying that you're either born Texan or you're not. I don't think that I really agree with those because it is. I think a lot of it is a mindset, and so I think I met several people over life that have moved here and have really adopted that mentality. So I think it starts in your mind and what you're willing to do and you kind of get what you put into it.
I agree. Okay, and then what do you think that is different between West Texans and Texans from other states of the region?
So having grown up in, sort of spent some years in other parts besides West Texas, I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference. Texas overall is pretty proud to be Texas. I think maybe out here you get a little bit more like the wider, some open spaces as opposed to cities. You get more of like the kind of rugged individualism, a lot more like ranchers and farm boys. But overall, as far as like the mentality that goes with being Texas, I think it's pretty similar across the state.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, being from San Antonio, the differences of like the ranchers and stuff. So yeah, I agree with that. And then how would you characterize the West Texans' relationship to the military?
Super friendly. There's a lot of Texans and West Texans especially that end up in the military. I've never met anybody who was a Texas native who was not at least appreciative of the military and the people that served in it. So it's a really solid relationship.
Okay, and then when and where did you enter the armed forces, and what branch did you serve in?
So I enlisted through the recruiting office in the Marine Corps here from San Angelo, but they are a substation. So I actually, the place where I enlisted and shipped to boot camp from was in Dallas, and then boot camp was in CRD in San Diego, California, along with combat training. I did my specialty MOS training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. But the majority of my time was spent in California, and that's where I was stationed.
That's cool. Okay, so what years were you in service?
So I enlisted in January of 2011 and got out in January of 2015.
Okay. And then during your years of service, were you primarily in the enlisted ranks or non-commissioned officer, an officer, or a warrant officer?
So I was, I did enlist. I was never an officer. I worked my way up through the ranks to a non-commissioned officer. So I don't know what rank-wise, but everybody starts off as an E1, an enlisted one. By the time I got out, I was an E5, a sergeant.
Okay. And then, one second. And so you served as like a non-commissioned officer. So Did you have a source of commission or?
No, so that would be just an actual, somebody
Okay.
who went in as an officer.
Okay.
Requires the college education
Yeah.
before going in. I waited to get mine till after.
Okay. And then, in what military conflict did you take part in?
So while they actually got Bin Laden while I was in training, I enlisted not necessarily with the hope, but with the just the expectation that I was probably going to end up in Afghanistan or Iraq during the operations that are still going on
Yes.
there. Although things are kind of winding down and then amping up and winding down, back and forth with that. I mean, just with the war that's been going on with that since 9/11.
Mm-hmm. And then, why did you enlist in the armed forces? Like, what motivated you to do so?
So when I was a kid and was trying to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I was talking to my dad, and he asked me, he said, what you do, he's like, your occupation isn't always what you're called to do. Like, you've got to find what you feel called to, and then find a job or an occupation that lets you do that. And especially at that point in life, I felt called to serve, to stand in between, innocent people and anybody else who was willing to cause them harm. And the military seemed like a great way to do that.
Okay. And then, what was your training like?
So boot camp was 13 weeks. I actually in an English class here, I wrote a paper on what boot camp was like. It was not anything like I expected it to be. I found it physically much easier than I went in expecting it to be.
Well, that's good.
Yes, but and I was a little bit older too. I was 22 when I turned 22 in boot camp. Actually, that was a great birthday, and so I was a little older than most of the other people there, and so it wasn't difficult, but it got really monotonous. Like the idea of everything that you do is watched and monitored. To the fact of getting dressed in the morning, put on your left sock, put on your right sock, and so the little things like that, and having no control over your own day-to-day choices was the most difficult part of it, really. That stopped basically. I mean, once boot camp was finished and we're officially Marines instead of recruits, things got a lot easier in that respect.
So you had more freedom, to go after
we
boot
did,
camp?
yeah. So after boot camp, we were still in a student status until we had finished all the other training that we had, the combat training and the specialty training for our MOS. But there was more stuff, you had time over the weekends that you could go and do stuff that you wanted. You could call family members and stuff like that.
You weren't
over free time. Right.
Okay.
Usually still had places that you had to be here by this time and that time, but there was a lot more freedom. And then once the school training was finished and we got to the fleet, as they call it, then it became much more like a job that, from, we're going to meet at 6 a.m. for PT, and then the work day ends at 5, and then you're free to go and do whatever. But
so a work, yeah.
Right.
Okay. And then, what were the race relations like when you were enlisted?
I never saw any issues with it. I certainly met individuals in there who were racist, but by and large, as a whole, I never saw or experienced any type of discrimination of any kind due to race.
Mm-hmm. Did you find your service challenging, other than the boot camp and?
I found at times, there were aspects of it. The majority of my time after boot camp and training like that, I was attached to a logistics battalion, and so so I was a heavy equipment operator, and so we did a lot of convoys, loading and unloading trucks with forklifts and big, heavier pieces of gear, doing earthwork with bulldozers, building berms for training camps and stuff that the battalion exercises that we went on. And so there were times where it was a lot of it seemed like it was an all or nothing deal. We would go from doing, there's not a whole lot going on and everybody's kind of like, lay down low, to we've got 6 convoys that are going out that have got to be loaded and ready to go, and a lot of stuff that's got to be done. So there's a lot of times when it was late nights and just all out. And there was a couple of times, so I did 2 years and then married. And so there were a few, so my wife was with me out there for the last 2 years. And there were a couple times when I ended up calling him like, hey, I'm not going to be home when you get home tonight because we're going to the field for the next 6 days. Mm-hmm. So there were definite challenges and things to work with, but by and large, it wasn't anything that I or she resented. I mean, really, as long as you maintained an open mindset and kind of rolled with the punches, there wasn't anything that rocked the boat too bad.
So it was nothing like physically challenging. It was more just like the little things.
It was mostly little things. I really, by and large, I did not find the military to be super physically challenging. I mean, there were definite like fitness standards, and we spent a lot of time physically training. But that was mostly stuff I'd been doing, in the years leading up to it, anyways, and still do to some extent. Yeah. I don't run nearly as much as I used to. So that in and of itself, so the physical training requirements weren't anything that I had any problems with.
Okay. And then what conception did you have of the United States at the time of your enlistment, and what did America symbolize to you?
So I think America then, and really kind of still does, and it sounds kind of, to put it this way, it almost sounds slightly negative, so bear with me. But I think that we celebrate a lot of individualism, not as in we're all about the individual, but that the individual has so many opportunities. Other countries, places that we've been and have seen in their different systems of government and economy and whatnot are much more geared towards society as a whole, which has some benefits to it as well. But I feel like you take away a lot of the drive to compete and to excel at anything when there's not a reward for doing it. I mean, what's the point in being better or the best at something if there's no recognition or anything to it? And so I think that so America has always, to me, has been a symbol of the opportunities that are available to you, and a lot of it does take a lot of work. I had to maybe kind of going off the question a little bit, but in that light, so I was homeschooled my whole life growing up, and when I went to enlist in the military, because I did not have a official high school diploma, that presented some difficulty. So I went to Howard College out here and got my GED. Well, they weren't accepting GEDs waivers anymore, so I ended up having to take a semester of college credit hours to become eligible to enlist. And so I had to put myself through a semester of school while working full time, living on my own, and other things like that. And so it wasn't something that I wasn't able to just, I'm going to walk into the office and say sign me up. But because I did push through that, I've gotten out and have been able to come to school here at ASU with no student loans, no debt, everything like that. And that has been a tremendous opportunity. And so it cost 4 years of my life in the military and the work to get in, but it's paid in gold on the back end as far as I'm concerned. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity available to everybody if we're willing to do the work that it takes to go out and hunt it down.
And do you think like the diversity that we have in America is what makes it like so different than like what you see like overseas and like stuff like that?
Yeah, so we certainly are diverse. We've got a lot of. I mean, America is starting. We're a melting pot. We caught everything from everybody, and I think that gives us a lot of opportunity. I think that to an extent, that's opportunity that we don't we probably don't fully take advantage of is the diversity that we have available to us. We still are wary of different, which is really a shame, because there are so many things that we can learn from different people that have experienced different things and have experienced some of the same things and dealt with it in different ways. So now I would definitely say that diversity is a strength that we have available to us, and one that I wish we would utilize more.
Yes. And then, were you deployed overseas?
I did. So I deployed on what is called a MEU, MEU. It's an acronym, which stands for a Marine Expeditionary Unit. So my battalion, we were a logistics battalion. We attached to a infantry division and went out on 3 ships. And the majority of the time that we were on ship, we were in the it was in the Indian Ocean and that area. So I went to countries like Bahrain, saw Dubai, Abu Dhabi. I'm drawing a blank. We put in at a port in India. We hit Hawaii going in and out, just different ports. So as opposed to going to a single deployment to like Afghanistan and staying there for 8 months, I was on a ship off and on. We would be on ship for 2-3 weeks, and then put ashore somewhere and do a training exercise, and then be there for like a week, and then go back on the ship for a couple weeks and put ashore someplace else. We got Liberty ports in a couple places. Got to see some of the different cultures in a couple of places. So that was my deployment, and it lasted about 8 months total.
Okay.
We just were mobile all throughout, as opposed to in one spot.
Okay. And it was just that one deployment?
I just did the one. So due to the way that those work, they trade out every so often. So as we were leaving, the next group on a different set of ships was coming out, because the purpose of a expeditionary unit, which I think is one of the following questions there, its mission is a readiness force. So we were there as a case of like disaster relief.
Okay.
And so they've done things like when hurricanes have hit other islands and places close to, especially like U.S. territories, then they can do like disaster and humanitarian aid relief. Typically, it's an immediate response, and as soon as other organizations come in to take over, the Marines will withdraw from it, because ultimately our purpose is there to defend, but that we're there for
support
in cases like that as well.
So like Puerto Rico and like stuff like that too.
So I'm actually so I'm not positive to what extent they were involved, or the MU might have been there for that. But if so, it would have probably as big a deal as that was, and as fast a response from other organizations was. I doubt that if they were there, I doubt they would have been there more than 2 or 3 days. But in the event that something is needed close there, and they are the closest responders, then they are prepared to.
Okay.
So as a result of that, we went through some additional training in regard for things like humanitarian aid, how to set up, camp and process refugees through to get them, medical help and shelter and things of that nature. So it was a long workup.
Yes.
I think it was about 1.5 years that we spent training for an 8-month deployment. Then, I just did the one.
Okay, so that was like the units you served in during your deployment was like the missionary thing?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so you didn't serve in any direct combat during your deployment?
I did not,
Okay.
for which my wife and mother are extremely thankful, and I am too. I certainly did not join looking to go get into a firefight, although I was willing, should the need rise. But no direct combat.
Okay, so that means you were not wounded in action.
I was not.
And did not become a prisoner of war.
Thank God. No.
Yes. Okay, and then what did you think of the local inhabitants that you encountered while you were over there?
So pretty much any place that we went to, the only place where we saw local inhabitants was in like in cities, and most of the places that we went to city-wise, where we actually like interact with people, A lot of them were big like tourist spots. So I think that we probably kind of lost a little something there as far as like really getting to see the roots of culture of those countries. But it was still, people obviously talk different, different language, stuff like that. But they dress different and have different priorities, different things that they are considered important and sacred and friendly and not friendly. So before every place that we went to, we would have a safety briefing where they would, talk about things like, okay, this is something that this culture finds, threatening. This, something that we don't consider, an issue. Like there's some places where it's not polite to offer, as a foreigner to offer, to shake hands.
Yeah.
There's places where where it's it's an insult to like throw something on the street. I mean, we call it littering here, and it's against the law, but that doesn't keep it from happening. But there are places where you can get thrown in jail for things like that. And so there was a different. So it was interesting to just see different things that different cultures prioritize,
and to be like aware of it too, to prevent like
right.
Yes. Okay, and then when you interacted with the local inhabitants, what do you think their conceptions of the United States? So again, that I guess is kind of like the flip side of that coin. Going someplace, I don't think we certainly were never anywhere where they had never seen an American United States or anything like that before, and so in like the tourist side of it, any place where we went on Liberty and had like cab drivers, and we would talk to them about what their life was like, and they asked us some questions. I never got the feeling that we were disliked or that they resented us being there. But that was we were not in Afghanistan fighting a war. It was definitely a place where we were there. They had goods, things that we wanted and were buying, trading, and so it was very amicable relationships all around. I think that most of them had a definite like preconceived idea of what Marines were like, and I think they kind of expected us all to be 6 foot, Captain America, kinds of guys. And I'm not sure whether they were disappointed with what they got or not. But so that was kind of interesting. And you think like the way you probably like respected them and like didn't disrespect the cultures, you think that played a big part of like?
I definitely think it would help a lot, and part of that is just from the idea that of how I feel. Somebody different, comes into to West Texas or something like that. As I mentioned, like we work hard. There's not much that will irritate a Texan more than somebody who's lazy and not working when there is work that needs to be done. And so that's something that like I would expect other people to respect and appreciate and follow to the best that they can. And so we try by trying to extend that same courtesy in places where I was the outsider. I think it helped a lot with the relationship.
Yes. Right. And then you discussed this a little bit before, but how did your service influence or affect your family at home?
Overall, I think it was really well. My parents, I think, were very proud of me. I've had a couple other relatives, excuse me,
You're good.
Who have married into the family who were military. I've got an uncle who was he just retired actually as a 20-year lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, I think, and had another cousin by marriage who was in the Army and got out, I think, as a staff sergeant. So the family, as I said, they got that West Texas mentality. It was very open and receptive to the idea. Again, everybody, I think, had a pretty collective sigh of relief when I never ended up, going anywhere combat-wise, and I don't think anybody's too worried about it. But everybody will kind of, be happy when my inactive reserve time is up and I can't get just called back all of a sudden either with what's going on. But overall, I think everybody was proud. Everybody was very supportive. There was a chance, with different training exercises and stuff, so that it could have put a strain on my marriage. But I was very fortunate with the woman who agreed to be my wife, and she was really flexible with it. We went into it with the mindset of we knew what we were getting into when we married, and just didn't let anything phase us too much with it. So I think the family overall was extremely supportive.
And so she came with you to California for your training?
She did.
Okay.
Not during the initial part of training.
Okay.
I was through all of that, and actually with the unit I ended up deploying with before we married, and she moved out with me then.
And you think that helped too?
I do. Yes, I do. The long distance deal wasn't the most difficult, and so, to an extent, like the long distance that we did during training, I think helped a lot with the long distance that we experienced during the deployment.
Yes.
So no, I think it worked well.
And then, what are your most vivid memories of your time in service?
It's a lot of. So I remember in boot camp the ceremony where we got given our Eagle Globe and Anchor. It officially marks the transition from recruit to Marine. It happens after a hellaciously long hike up a stupidly steep hill, and they call it the EGA ceremony. And so that was a great feeling. Boot camp was almost over, and stuff like that. While deployed, there are different things. I got the chance to see a honest to God thunder and lightning storm out in the middle of the ocean where it was just black as pitch. We went out on the deck for a little while. After a while, they told us we had to go in, and so it would just go from black night all over to just white lightning, just as far as you could see from one side of the horizon to the other. It would just light the whole place up, and then it would go dark again, and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face.
Oh wow!
And then it would flicker and flash again, and the ship was rocking, and salt water, ocean spray everywhere. That was. I tried taking a video of it. It did not do it justice at all. But that's a great memory. These things like seeing the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world, in Dubai, and standing underneath it and looking up at it. Just different structures, different things. A lot of snapshot kind of just memories of places and things are some pretty vivid memories.
Probably like some of like the cultures and stuff too, like the buildings and stuff, and just like
the buildings, especially. And so I've been drawn to like buildings and architecture and structure and things like that. So those definitely drew me in seeing the way they do things and older kinds of structure, and some places in Europe and stuff like that. Has been cool. So it's a lot of like the way things are in different places that I remember.
What your major is today, the civil engineering, did that help make you want to do that, or did you already want to do that before you went into
So it kind of flip-flopped the other way. I joined kind of with the idea of doing the military as a career for the full 20 years. As I promoted and rose through the ranks, I realized that I don't like being the guy on the bottom of the totem pole and being told what to do. And I gave serious thought to doing the Marine Corps' enlisted 2-officer commission program, but there is no guarantee what job you'll get. And at that point in time, I already knew that I wanted to be an engineer, attached to the engineer platoon and building things, and getting to do some work on roads and stuff like that. I knew that I liked that kind of stuff. And so since I wasn't sure that I would get to be an engineering officer, I decided, well, I'll just go to school and just be an engineer, civilian-wise. So really it was the Marine Corps and some of the experiences that I got to do there that influenced the school major.
And then, what sorts of technology did you use in your service?
So as a equipment operator, I did a lot of. I got to play with Tonka trucks, basically, just the big boy kind. So I operated many different kinds of forklifts and bulldozer, road grader, a backhoe. I never got licensed on it, but I got the chance to play in a Calamar, which is a machine that picks up the big sea containers that you see on different ships and stuff like that. So a lot of different stuff, different ways to move goods, materials, and equipment from point A to point B.
Okay. And then, did you expect to face any challenges when you returned to civilian life?
I really did not. I don't know how much that was maybe just due to not having done, combat and anything like that, but I never suffered from anything anywhere close to PTSD or anything like that. I knew that there were going to be some things that were going to be a bit of an adjustment, just as far as different mindsets of people, especially coming to school, and at that point being 25, 26 years old and in a class with a bunch of 18-year-old freshmen, but not anything that I anticipated being a struggle of any kind.
Okay. And then, did being from Texas shape your years in service in any way?
I think that it kind of did, just with the mentality going back to the way the West Texas kind of feels about the military and how supportive they are. Having always had like that appreciation for the people willing to serve, made it, I don't know if easier is a way to kind of meld into that lifestyle, but it certainly didn't hurt. It didn't make it any more difficult.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure you probably had some, like, guys that you're probably with that weren't from Texas. Did you see, like, the differences between that?
I don't know. Nobody that I was ever stationed with, worked with, that I got to know very well had family who resented the military or anything like that. So I'm not sure.
Is that, like, the same, like, respect kind of, like, for it?
Well, so I feel like the respect is there in a lot of places. But I was stationed at Camp Pendleton in California, which is a massive base, and I swear it seemed like half the Marines on there, probably a third at least, were from Texas. And so Texas is larger, than other states too. But I think the military is just so much more, is such a widely accepted way of life in Texas, and so that I think is maybe a little different from some other states.
And then after your time in the military, has your conception of Texas changed?
It has not, really. I mean, so things do change, over the years. But Texas, I think, is pretty much the same. I still see it as pretty much the same as when I went in. And I still, feel the same way about it. When I got out, we moved back. I was like, we're back in Texas for good if I have my choice in the matter.
Oh, you don't want to leave Texas? This is home?
I like visiting other places, but Texas is home.
Texas is home. Okay. And then after military, did your conception of the U.S. change?
It did not. Like I said, I was fortunate that the unit that I was attached to had a lot of great guys who were scattered all around. I've got one of my best friends now. He got out lives in Ohio. I've got some others who are still stationed in Michigan and North Carolina that we still keep in touch. And so it's nice to actually feel like not roots isn't the word, but to have some kind of connection with different places throughout the United States. I think that we are still a land of so many opportunities. And the military is only one avenue to reach some of them. But I think that there's a lot of them out there, and we should go get them.
Yeah. And then, how do you feel about your military service looking back at it?
I loved it. I really, I have absolutely no regrets from it. I think that it did play a pretty influential role in shaping my character and personality to who and what I am today. And I wouldn't have traded it for anything.
Do you have any advice for young men or women who are just entering the service?
You can't be shy. The military is very much what you want to make of it, and you can excel as far as you want to push it. They've got so many things that are above and beyond what most people think of when they think of the military, as far as their sports, their extracurricular activities besides just the basics of being a Marine or a soldier that are available to you if you want to pursue it. And all you got to do is seek it out.
All right, and then do you have any items or objects that you want to share with it or anything?
I don't think so. It was a fairly extensive set of questions, actually.
Okay, and then would you like to share anything else about your service?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm good.
All right, thank you so much for
Absolutely.